Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Lighthouse Sessions. I'm excited today. We have my new friend, Scott Miller, with us. Scott, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So, I'm based in Chicago, Illinois for part of the year. I'm based in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam for the other part of the year. My wife is Vietnamese. We own 4 businesses together. So we have a consulting business in the U.S. We have a digital marketing agency in the U.S. We have a consulting business in Vietnam, and then totally unrelated to any of those, we have a corporate arbitrage business where we do corporate housing. So keeps us busy, and other than that, I'm a more experienced person, not older, just a little more experienced. And I got 3 adult children, all in their 30s. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So
I love it. Well, let's talk about your journey as an entrepreneur, because I think that's the fundamental. I realize that a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs, we think we're alone because we put our nose to the grindstone, and when we look up, everybody is either can't fathom why we do what we do, or they're let's hurry up and go. It's happy hour somewhere, and I had this fascinating conversation. I had to explain to my kids what the acronym TGIF means because they'd never heard it. So what was your journey? What was the first step where you realized that you were more likely to be an entrepreneur than an employee?
So I started out as a truck driver in Brooklyn, New York. I was a Teamster driver for a company out of they were over in Newark, New Jersey, but my pedal run, where my territory where I delivered everything, was in Brooklyn, East New York. Have you ever been to that neighborhood? It's not the most it's not the friendliest neighborhood, So
yeah.
But the folks that ran that union, they had connections in the neighborhood, let's say, and so the people in the neighborhood that were conducting various types of business, they would leave our trucks alone. They wouldn't. They were influenced not to do anything to the drivers of the trucks or the freight or anything like that. So that's how I started off. And one day I was driving down the street and I said, this is not for me. Nothing wrong with being a truck driver, by the way. I was honest living and worked hard, but I knew at that point it wasn't for me. So many people have always, I'm an extrovert. A lot of people always said to me, hey, you got the gift of gab, why don't you, go into sales? So I was like, that's a good idea. I'm going to do that. So went into sales, and I quickly learned that the gift of gab is maybe the worst trait that you can have when you go into sales, right? So because you want to listen to people, you don't want to talk all the time, right? And then from there, I met somebody I was in a sales role for a company, and I had a truck that I had leased onto a company, and he had a truck that was also leased to that same company. And we said, hey, we found a little company for sale. We said, why don't we take our 2 trucks, and then this other little company, we'll buy that company and go into business. So we did that, and a very good learning experience in my life. Like, it got me I had the same vision that maybe many people, maybe some of your audience can identify with this, that, family and friends, that when you go into business, they think that you're bringing in millions and millions of dollars, and you're laying on the beach with a little glass with the umbrella in it, and that's, your whole life. And they don't see, the weeks where none of your customers paid you for the last month. So now you got to go down and take money out of your savings to put it into the company account to make payroll and pay fuel bills and all these kinds of things, right? So so that was my first taste of being an entrepreneur. I sold that business after 8 years. I sold my part of the business to somebody else partnered with my partner, and I exited that business. And I got out with basically, outside of I made a good living over the 8 years, but then I got out in the end with a little bit more than I put into the business, right? And so, but I learned a lot of lessons from that business. I learned in any business, whether it's corporate or your own thing, the only number that matters is net net. It's not gross sales. It's not, EBITDA. It's not, it's net net. How much money do you have after you pay all your bills, all your obligations, and you paid the tax man? Once you've satisfied all that, how much money do you have left? So, and I would venture to say that there's a lot of small businesses that number is not a very healthy number, right? So, but like everybody, or many entrepreneurs, I got the bug at that point, right? So, and then I just, I don't classify myself as a serial entrepreneur, because after that, I did go back into the corporate world for many years, but I always had a side business that I ran even when I was in the corporate world. So, so that's how I got started as an entrepreneur, and I got the bug. Like today I would not be able to work for somebody else like that. I work for the worst boss in the whole planet, which is myself.
My boss can be a real jerk. He doesn't even give me weekends off.
What's up with that? We got the same boss, I think, so.
It's funny. I liken being an entrepreneur to being a gladiator in the days of old. We show up into the arena, we do what we got to do to survive the day, and meanwhile, we got this entire audience who's never been in the arena, giving us this going. You didn't put enough in.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
I was on a podcast, and some young, wonderful human asked me, what's the training for being an entrepreneur? And I said, I'm pretty sure it's a cross between genetic insanity and some element of a desire to be a crash test dummy, because we try things that normal people cringe at. So
yeah, that's a great description, by the way. I'm gonna steal that from you, by the way. I mean, that's a perfect explanation, I think.
It's funny because my boys, they don't know anything different as far as they're concerned. When they grow up, they're both in their teens. And as far as they're concerned, it's a question of what business will I start?
Right.
And my wife is really, really encouraging them to go the traditional college and, long career route. And I'm like, I don't think that exists as it used to anymore.
No, it's too undefined, right? It's nothing wrong with a college education, by the way. I had, if you have a medical issue, you want somebody who's been to quite a bit of schooling, right? But I'm not going to go into the bathroom and operate on myself or anything like that, watching a YouTube video. But, aside from that, and let me say again, clearly, I'm not against college educations, but I think many people come out of college today without direction and are woefully unprepared for not only, forget about being entrepreneurs, they're woefully unprepared for the corporate world as well, right? And, so that's kind of a shame because college is so expensive and things like that. But there was an old movie, I forget what it was, and the kid's in an interview and he says, well, I did this and that, and I went to school and I got this degree, why won't you hire me? And the hiring manager looks at him and says, well, you had fun, didn't you?
Well, and for what it's worth, I do hope my children go to university. It is still a hope, but I would like them to do it very differently, because when I went, a few years ago, let's just leave it at that, you got these dead end jobs. Everybody was waiting tables. And I was thinking to myself, for my kids' sake, instead of getting a job that, pays enough to cover your rent and that's it, what if you started a business when the risk is low and you're there getting your education while you're running a business?
100%. I literally just had a conversation with somebody last night in that vein of, when you're young, you're, even though you have an equal opportunity of failure, you have a lot of road ahead of you to recover if something crashes and burns, right?
Exactly.
I'm 68 years old, right? And so I guess I fit that description you had earlier, because I just started 2 of these 4 businesses 2 years ago when I was 66. But so maybe I'm a glutton for punishment or something like that. But the road, the runway for me one would think is shorter, right? So if I crash and burn at this point, it's harder for me to recover. The good news is I spent 40 years getting experience and learning about business and how to do sales and how to connect with people and communicate and, you know, understand P&Ls and all these kinds of things. So, you know, so my chance of crashing and burning is probably less than the 20-something-year-old, but, you know, if I crash and burn, I got, you know, less runway to recover, right? So.
Well, and for what it's worth, Scott, you're just young and getting started. One of my dear friends, Tom Gay, when he was 77, he launched his seventh business, and his wife said, "This is your last." And he said, "Maybe."
Yeah, that's right.
No promises, but you know, anyways, I think being an entrepreneur is different. So, you and I, we've got a few years under our belts. We're experienced.
Mm-hmm.
What are some lessons you wish entrepreneurs today had learned or were learning, or even lessons you wish you'd learned earlier? What kind of things would you say to people to focus on, or how can they get started as an entrepreneur, basically?
Yeah, so I think the important thing when you start as an entrepreneur is to be honest with yourself about what is the opportunity of what you want to do. I think that one of the great things about entrepreneurs, and then one of the terrible things about entrepreneurs, is the exact same thing, which is this wild imagination that most of us have about what we can do and what's going to happen and how we're going to do this and make millions of dollars, or we're going to help all these people, and that's the goal, right? I mean, that hopefully that's my goal anyway, right? But I don't think people like that, me included, take enough time to do a reality check about what is, you know, what's real and what isn't. You know, if I'm going to start selling, you know, seats on one of Elon's rockets to Mars, you know, I better be pretty confident about when that spaceship's going to take off, right? So it's great if I can convince people to jump on, but if it never takes off, then it's not a good thing, right? So I would say that the first thing is a reality check about what are you actually doing. And, you know, I'm not a particular lover of accountants because they always make me do things I don't like to do in my business, but the good news is if you get a good one, they'll keep you straight, right? So the second thing I would say, number two, is once you start, keep your books and your business crystal super clean from day one. Because to go back, you know, I do valuations on businesses today with a partner in our business, and she's a CPA, and she tells me these horror stories about when she has to go back and fix something that somebody did for 10 years in a row, and now all of a sudden they're being audited, or they're trying to grow, or they grew the business in a tremendous way, and, you know, private equities come in with an interest or whatever, and they hand them a shoebox full of, that's their books. You know, it doesn't, so keep your business crisp, you know, absolutely spotless clean from day one with the money. And then the third thing is, I already mentioned a little bit earlier, is the only number that matters in business is your net. Gross sales are great. Yes, you want to grow your business. EBITDA, yes. You need to know what is your true cash. Margins, what is your profit? Yes, you need to know how much money you're making. And as you grow your business, you should be tracking that stuff daily, and you should follow that path. Those three things should follow a similar path. If your sales go rocketing north and your EBITDA goes negative because you spent all your cash, that's a recipe for disaster, right? So, you know, same thing with profit. If you can manage your cash flow, but your profit drops off, in other words, you're discounting products or you're giving stuff away or whatever you're doing, so you still have cash, but you're not making any money, that's also a recipe for disaster. So know what is your net. That's the most important number.
I love that. And I want to pull a couple of those things out because a friend of mine is a fractional CFO, and he teaches that people should know their numbers. And it is disturbing how few people actually have, first of all, up-to-date records, which how do you make business decisions without them? But the second thing is they don't know. I see a lot of businesses, especially in construction, they don't exactly know their margins. So they go out and quote with confidence and they give a quote to a client and they have no idea what the margin or profit on that is. And it's like, how do you sleep at night? I would have nightmares.
Well, that's a great example and a metaphor at the same time, right? Because what is the construction guy? What's his moniker? Measure twice and cut once, right?
Yeah.
But then when it comes to their books, they have no idea. They cut 47 times and they have no idea whether it fits in there or not, right? So it's funny that you use that as an example because it's so important to know. When I consult with businesses, I go in, I look at their books, I look at the three things I look at. I look at their team, I look at their books, and I look at their sales process, sales, marketing. I hate to say it as a sales guy, but marketing precedes sales, right? If you got to have good marketing. Don't let the marketing people in your audience let that go to their head. But
I won't say a word.
Yeah. So hopefully this is not recorded right there. But here's the thing, like I can go in and look at their books and I can tell them literally within 15 to 30 minutes exactly what's wrong with their business. Exactly. Numbers don't lie. They don't lie. Even if somebody's trying to cover them up, all they have to do is go through a forensic audit and they'll realize that, numbers don't lie, right? So, it's but it's very easy to tell. And here's the thing about an entrepreneur. Again, it's a great thing and it's a terrible thing at the same time, but they're blind to their own ways, often. Like we get an idea, we fall in love with it, and then we won't listen to what other people have to say. And that becomes problematic in a business if you want to scale it, right? If you want to be $1 million business and you be in charge of everything for the rest of your life and work 80 hours a week, then that's fine. But if you intend to grow the business, that's a recipe for disaster. So,
and I think that's a key distinction that a lot of people miss is there's no judgment. I talk a lot about growth on the podcast.
mm-hmm.
I deeply respect the person who says, I don't want a $1 billion company. I'm happy. I think it's the EOS space. They say that their average implementer makes $400,000 a year as a solo outfit. There's nothing wrong with that. If that's your lifestyle and you're happy with it, great. But if you come to me and say, I want to grow, there's certain foundational things that I say you got to have in place. And for what it's worth, Scott, I come from sales first, marketing second.
Right.
I think it was Steve Jobs that said that marketing's job is to make sales obsolete. I believe, and I want your take on this because I'm contrarian most days, if we do operations right and we can earn referrals from our client base, we can at least reduce the dependency on marketing and sales.
Yes, I think that I don't know if anybody will ever completely, particularly nowadays with the advent and the, very, like this tremendous growth that AI is having right now. I think the false prophet in that is that people think that they use AI, they click a few buttons, and then magically their business grows by X number of dollars, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't work like that. AI is great at it's going to add up a complex formula way faster than you and I can ever possibly do it, no matter how smart we are.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be able to implement it for a customer, right? So it's not going to be able to do that. It will be able to do certain things. I guess I would agree with a well-run organization, which is another, maybe we'll call it, I gave the 3 important things, but maybe this is number 4, is that early on, is document everything and set SOPs for everything in your business so everybody knows exactly what to do and exactly what to expect. So if you have that, if you've done that and you're running a well-oiled machine, yes, you'll be less dependent on sales. I hate to say that. I'm the sales guy, right? I
Sorry.
don't know if we'll ever be, because it's, what do you describe as marketing? I mean, marketing is bringing a customer to the fold, right? It's interesting, getting something interested in whatever you're doing. So
Yeah.
at its core, will that disappear? I don't think so, because whether you're using social and you don't really call that marketing, right, to bring clients in, or you're using LinkedIn or whatever you're using, at its core, that's really marketing, right? So
Yeah.
will that disappear? I mean, the days of marketing departments with these big budgets and, call centers with, in Vietnam, one of our clients there, a big hotel chain, we've done business with them for several years now. They had these call centers where they're calling to, in the US, the hotel chains give you the loyalty programs for free. Over there, you pay for it, right? So they have these call centers. They have one in Australia, one in Philippines, one in Saigon, one in Hanoi, and one in Thailand. And the office in Hanoi is now closed. The office in Thailand is down to a shell, because all these countries, just like the US have the do not call list. Over there, like in Vietnam, it's a communist country. You don't break the like here, you break the do not call list and you go, oh, wow, really sorry, I won't ever call you again, right? So
Yeah.
people can like say a few, pointed words to you and hang up on you, right? Over there, you get in serious trouble. Like it's a serious thing. So so their call center in Saigon last year was 36 people. We went there this year to meet with them to pivot, because that call center is down to 4 people, and all they're doing is calling existing customers because it's so regulated, right? Same thing with SMS, right? It's hard to get text messages out now here in the US because, if you break these rules, it's the worst thing than the government is AT&T and Verizon. They will, we've all seen a call come in or a text come in that says potential spam. Now they have a new category that is called, it says scam, a likely scam or something like that. If I get a phone call and it says on my caller ID scam, or a text message that says scam, I'm never going to answer those people.
Nope.
Never, ever, ever. Right. So, so marketing has changed, but I don't think that will go away. A well-run ops, ops in your business, can it take away from the number of salespeople? Yeah. But I don't think, as of today, sales and marketing is not going to disappear.
No, not disappear. I just believe it's going to be less important. And by less important, what I think of is you'll be able to do more with fewer resources, because I'm a big fan of AI being used by experts.
Right.
I cringe when somebody says, I fired my marketing department and I do it with AI. And I say, well, what's your background in marketing? I don't have one. Okay, so my question is always, how do you judge the quality of the results? And it's amazing how many people don't have an answer for that, because if you can't say with confidence, this is good marketing, bad marketing, you're not going to see that pain until 3 months later when your salespeople are saying, our pipeline has gotten worse.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that's AI, and maybe the journey to AI, I'll call it, right? When I was a kid, you had to do math on a paper, and you had to prove your math. You couldn't just write down the answer. You had to prove it out, right? and then my father was a nuclear engineer, right? So when all the other kids were getting calculators, he handed me a slide rule, and he said, "Here, you can use this," right? So I became pretty proficient at a slide rule at that point, right? And then of course came the calculators, and then the computers, and then personal computers, and then our phones, and now AI. The challenge that I see with that is, I don't think this is not a conspiracy theory, but I think we've made people dumber over time because they don't know how to do critical thinking. They don't know what the answer to something is. Like, you could ask me, hey, the 10%, use an easy number, right? 10% of 100 is 10. I know that's right. So then if I see something else that doesn't match up with that, I'm like, wait a second, this doesn't look right. Many of the young people today, they don't know that 10% of 100 is 10. So if you told them, you bring them into the classroom and you say, hey, 10% of 100 is 22.3. Now they've got bad information. They think it's the right thing, but then when they go, when they have machine learning or calculators or computers doing things for them, if all I would have to do to completely upend a company, a person, or the world, maybe, is I could just go in and reprogram that so that it would get an answer that I wanted them to get.
Yep.
And then they would have no idea if it's right or wrong. Right. So
and no way to validate. And
no way to validate it. Right. So that's I'll call it the scary version of AI. The good version of it is if people that aren't, AI experts, if they would just learn how to do prompts, because prompts is everything with AI, and use it for simple things. Right. I use it to build spreadsheets now. It's great for that. I do the prompt. I tell them how I want the thing to look, what outcome I want. It's very good at that. I go back and check it because I know how to build. I know Excel, so I look at it and I go, okay, this is correct. And then, but it does it in 30 seconds, 45 seconds, as opposed to me working on it for 3 or 4 hours, right? So in that way, it's very good. But there's going to be, I think we're seeing challenges already. Like I saw an ad the other day. One of my customers said, hey, I'm doing AI ads, and the person looked like a real person in the ad had 2 right arms and 1 left arm, right? And so obviously when they created it, it picked up something from another image, and and they never even noticed it, and they posted it on social media, and I'm like, that guy has 2 right arms, right? So but the person looked very real, other than the fact that he had 2 right arms. But
Yep. Well, it's funny. I think as in my household, I teach my kids that critical thinking. So I believe the skills they're going to need when they grow up. Yes, they're going to need to learn how to use technology, but critical thinking and learning, things like, does this look reasonable, are going to be huge. And the other one I focus on a lot is communication skills.
Yes.
And I have a funny observation, Scott, that a lot of us, let's say over the age of 40, we have an unnatural advantage with AI because we know what we know, and we're going to challenge AI to get it right.
Right.
Whereas, and this is the part that I say is the scary version of AI, it's programmed to be plausible. And by very definition, if something sounds plausible, unless you can look at it and go, wait a minute, why is there two right arms?
Yeah.
But I would hope that most people can tell the difference, look at something and go, okay, it's got 2 right arms. But when you're doing written stuff, you need to be clear on what that looks like. Now you're out doing the podcast circuit and you're looking to spread your message. What do you hope somebody watching this takes away from our conversation today? What's your big takeaway item?
So look, at this point in my life, I do business for a profit. I want to make money, but I also want to help people. That's more important to me today than how much money I make. I've made plenty of money over my life, and I don't say that. I hope I don't sound braggadocious by saying that. It's not meant to say I'm so great. It's just meant to say that, I genuinely want to help small businesses in particular. My expertise in helping people grow a business seems to be between $3 and $10 million. There's a couple of checkpoints in that journey that are very critical for entrepreneurs to be able to get over certain humps to if they want to scale a business, right? So that seems to be my, sweet spot. I love to connect with people, whether I do business with them or not. I love to share ideas. I love to, um, especially young people, if they're looking for help, maybe they don't have a lot of money, but they need somebody who's a little more experienced to help them get started on that journey. I'm not going to help them with money, but I'll help them with advice and how to get started, right? So, and I'll do that gratis, right? I'm not going to charge young people for that, or even old
I
people.
love.
Somebody starts a business at 80, I'm not going to charge them either. So,
I was gonna say, what about us older guys? No, I'm
yes,
kidding.
sir.
But one of the things, it's funny because a friend of mine said you got to reread The Richest Man in Babylon, which I've dismissed for a while because I read it when I was too young.
Yeah.
And one of the key things was don't take advice from people who don't know what they're talking about.
That's
And I was
right.
like, oh my God, it was like 1926, they predicted that AI was going to come along. And for the record, there's a lot of bad advice. So one of the things I tell people, you want to dismiss this older generation. Apparently 45 is considered old now for the
Yeah.
ageist group. Don't throw us out with too much vigor, because we know what it's like. You've gone through more life cycles than I have slightly, but the reality is we've seen ups and downs, and we've seen recoveries, we've seen bubbles. You can't replace that expertise with an algorithm.
That's for sure. The other thing I would say from like a kind of a personal note standpoint, since I do live in Vietnam part of the year, it's the respect of ages is critically important in Asia. You would never say something disrespectful to an older person there. Just doesn't happen, right? So here you hear kids swearing at their parents and yelling at them or whatever. Like, I never got away with that, but I see it plenty of times. And just the other night in a restaurant, some kid yelling at his mother and using F-bombs and everything. He was probably, I don't know, 15 years old. I think if we kind of went back to that in our society, it would be a good thing for everybody, right? Because I'm not saying that older people are right all the time or that they're, whatever, but they've earned their stripes, so to speak, right? That was a popular saying when I was a kid. The fact that I have more experience than a 25-year-old kid doesn't make me a better person than them. It just makes me more experienced. That's it. Like, I've learned lessons that they don't even know about yet. And so, if people would, if people would just have a little bit more respect for each other. You see this wild show on social media now where keyboard warriors, where they would say something on a post or a comment to you they would never say to your face, right? So just that's a critical piece, and understand that, I met a guy a couple of weeks ago in Hoi An, which is just south of Da Nang in Vietnam, and he's 93 years old. I actually have some pictures with him, and he was sent with a delegation of other veterans from the Vietnam War, and he fought for the Viet Cong, right? He fought for the North, and he was there in his uniform, and he had, I don't know, a gazillion ribbons, and he and I had this long conversation. Luckily, my wife, since she's Vietnamese, she speaks the language I do not, right? And so, but he and I had this long conversation about, what it was about that war, what was the impact on people. And strangely enough, he and I, my understanding from being a U.S. citizen, and him from fighting for the other side in that war from the U.S., we had the same goal. Like, we wanted the same thing. You know what I mean? it became like wildly obvious to me that, to your point, listen to other people, like learn, listen to learn, and be willing to, um, like I said, I'm 68. I'm still like, I'm learning every day, doing things to learn every day. So
Well, and I think that's once we think we have all the answers, that's when we start to get out of touch. So,
that's right.
well, it was fun talking to you. I could talk to you all day, Scott, but I want to be mindful of your time.
Yep.
Where can people go to connect with you, learn more about you, or just take you up on your generous offer for a little bit of sage advice?
Yeah. So they can find me on LinkedIn. I'll send you the link because obviously there's a few Scott Millers running around out there. Years ago, I worked for GE Capital. There was 13 Scott Millers that worked at GE Capital at that time. So
Wow.
I understand there's a few of us, right? So LinkedIn is a good place to find me. And then they can find me on our main website, my wife and I, which is moza-bella.com. And again, I'll send you the proper spelling of that. But those are the two places. Send me a message. There's no obligation. I'm not going to try to sell anybody anything. And if they want me to help them, I'd be happy to do that for a profit. But I'm really more so looking for connections and ways that to help the connection stream, so to speak, right? So
I love it. Well, thank you very, very much for hanging out with me, Scott. And I will also put the link in the show notes so they don't have to filter through all the Scott Millers out there. So thank you.
thank you so much.